in the chat so that someone can see that there's a pause and we can try to rectify the delay. Also, if the share screen is not coming up, please go ahead and drop that in the chat as well so we can know if we're missing anything. A couple of quick points around when we are in our breakout groups, we want to follow a simple model of, bless you, stepping up and stepping back. So if you're someone who's more inclined to share freely and openly, we invite you to just pause and take a moment to step back to invite space for people who usually find themselves taking a moment to really process and speak. If you are somebody who's usually really reserved in your speech, we invite you to go ahead and just throw it on out there to get the conversation moving forward. And so that said, we are super excited to be here today. I'm going to roll it on over to Kiana so that we can continue to move forward.
Yes, thank you, Tree. And thanks everybody for joining, especially in an afternoon session. So welcome, this is Just Food's Fresh Connect series, session 2, Tools for Collaboration, Funding, SNAP, and EBT. This is going to be an interesting one and our first time doing it. So I'm really excited to jump on in for this lunchtime session. This is part of a series of, from our community the Fresh Connect Training Community Food Project and Planning Design. Today, we're gonna have 3 facilitators today. So we have from Just Food, myself, the Special Projects Consultant. We have Tree, that you've heard earlier, a longstanding Just Food trainer, community chef, and advocate in her own right. And we'll be introducing you to Katie in just a little bit. So let's jump in to share a little bit about Just Food as an organization. We're a nonprofit based in New York City. We support our regional produce, and our policy work goes beyond the region into international spaces. But we work on the grassroots to support community-driven solutions to our food system. So we shifted our mission. Just Food's an organization that's been around for over 25 years, and within the last 3 years, shifted our mission to aim to shift the power, health, and wealth of historically and economically marginalized communities, and shifting in decision making. So when we talk about equity and making equity our North Star for this organization, what we're really talking about is the intersectionality of equity around economic equity, environmental equity, and racial equity. So for us, this is how we all are in solidarity and collaborate with each other, but we're also holding that disproportionately there are communities that are impacted more than others. So, and the reason why is holding this equity lens we feel is important, and not just the trainings we do, but as we operate as an organization and continue to evolve and be rooted in this. Because there is diversity, inequities, and in complexity that is, again, disproportionately impacting historically and economically marginalized communities. Those are folks of color, seniors, mixed income, LGBTQ, Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks. That if we're building community-driven solutions, we need to hold those things in order to center ourselves, but also to make sure that we're addressing needs across the board. Because when we don't do that, in particular in the food system, many folks get marginalized, even though we think we're meeting a common good. So for this training, and for all our trainings, we'd like to offer community agreements that we hope everyone can adhere and hold us accountable as facilitators as well as participants. So we ask folks to listen actively, share intentionally. When you're in breakouts, we hold everybody on mute just to minimize background noise and talking over each other in most parts, certain talking parts of the training. But when we're in open forum or breakout rooms, the mics will, you will be unmiked. So please try not to talk over each other. So one mic, one speaker, so everyone gets a chance to hear clearly, speak intentionally, And then also, like Tree mentioned, stepping up and stepping back. If you know, different ways to share, we're offering an active chat as well as verbal. So if there's times when you feel more comfortable speaking up, please do, but make sure that other folks get a chance to share in the time that we have together. And you can always share in the chat. So to jump into today, we wanted to offer a recap on this roadmap that we've been offering for this series. So in last night, we kicked off the series with session 1, and which went really well. I'm super excited. And we're very much looking forward to offering session 1 live next Monday. So if you didn't get a chance to join session 1 last night, totally fine. We look forward to having you join live on Monday. And if not, you will have the links to, if you registered for session 1, you'll get the links and resources. Same for tonight, for today. We know that many folks may not be able to join an afternoon session. So we'll be making this link available to all session 2 registrants as soon as possible. So you will have the link and the documents that we're sharing today in advance of session 1 repeating, and you'll have even more days and a weekend to have it to think through and connect with your group members to think about any targeted questions or things you want to lift up or peer-to-peer networking you want to do in session 3. So session 2 is, this is the only time we're doing it live, but sharing the link. Session 1, link will be shared and live on Monday. And then Tuesday, we wrap up this series with a working session, and we look forward to seeing anybody who came to 1 and 2 with targeted questions and share. And depending on what comes in the community garden plot, we might also create space to answer the questions there as well. So without further ado, before we jump in, I do want to introduce, you know, something that's really important to Just Food is not just working with our grassroots partners on the ground, but other organizations that are building capacity and resources. And it's been so great engaging with multiple staff members at Farmers Market Coalition. And when they heard that we were doing this training, they were eager to connect and collaborate with us. So I'm welcoming as a co-facilitator for our EBT section, but she'll be joining us throughout. The training today is Katie Meyer. Am I saying that right, Katie? Am I saying your last name right?
It's Myrie, but
Myrie. I'm so sorry.
It's all good.
So Katie Myrie, the Farm Direct Tech Manager, is joining us from Farmers Market Coalition. I did want to also just give her the mic just to introduce and let us know a little bit about FMC.
Sure, yeah, and I do have a slide a little bit more deeper about FMC in my presentation. We are a web of market managers, operators, and farmers across the country. We really believe in connecting folks from regions. We're all doing very hyperlocal work in our communities, but it's really important that we kind of interact with each other on a national scale to make sure that we're learning from each other and exchanging information. So we kind of operate where we're learning from folks operating at the ground level, and we're sharing that information across a national network. We do a little bit of advocacy at the national level too. So I'm thrilled to be here. Nice to meet you all. Thanks so much, Kiana.
No, thank you. It's been great getting to know you and working on this training together. Yes. So yeah, let's just talk about what we're going to get into today. And again, you know, this series is serving as a blueprint. We wanted to offer these to help groups that are either new or existing members of community food projects, that they're building a blueprint and a roadmap for projects that are community driven, viable, and building direct connections with rural and hyperlocal food farmers, growers, and other suppliers. So today's agenda, we are jumping into the power of procurement and solidarity-based models. We're going to jump into the design piece and talk through the blueprint that we shared. We're going to share with folks that are new today and that we shared in session 1, just to hear how folks are starting to think about their entry roads or the work or the assets that are in their community in order to move forward into solidarity-based models. We're going to have a quick break, and then we're going to transition into the Snap Tech presentation by Katie. So just so folks are, that's today's agenda. And just so folks, I meant to mention in the recap is in session 1, we go through the local value chain or the region. And we also spend a lot of time grounding in understanding the concepts around food security, food justice, and food sovereignty. And we also discuss like unpacking food apartheid, what it is, how it impacts our community, our access to food, and how it can also impact our self-determination in community-led projects. We also discuss, and when you join session 1, discussing more about how charity shows up in our neighborhoods, and how we can continue to work together in solidarity to decrease reliance on charity, as well as increasing opportunities for each other. So I think this is a good time to transition into delving into these models a little bit more, passing the mic to Tree.
Thank you so much. Yesterday was, Kiana was on point. It was an extremely in-depth session and so much came out of it. So before I jump into this piece around the power of procurement, there are a couple of terms that came up yesterday that I just want to lift up today, right? So one of the main terms we led with was this notion of a spectrum of food security, as Kiana was talking about. And I bring that up today because as we move forward through this session, I want us to remember that there is no one size fits all. There is no cut and dry answer. It is literally a spectrum. All things happen on a range, right? And we are going to keep that at the forefront of our conversation today as we begin unpacking what power in community looks like when it comes down to food movements. Another term that came up quite a bit was equity, and I just want to lift up that at the center of equity is a recognition of our difference. And so equity is not equality. Equity is not saying that we are all the same, we all have the same needs. Equity is asking for us to privilege and put front and center the things that make us different, distinct, and specific, and building models around those things. Another term that was very important that also transitions to today is this notion of sovereignty or autonomy, what it means to be independent. And so with that said, when we look at solidarity-based models, right? These are models that on the most simple level are ways for community members to get access to foods in their neighborhoods that fit their economic, cultural, social, and I would even venture to say educational needs. And when we think about the need to provide for community members in these ways, right, looking from an equity lens, then we can begin to have a conversation around who do we need to work with in the community to make these things possible. And so solidarity-based models, they rely very heavily on community relationships in order to work. There is a notion of collective power that centers diverse voices with diverse experience and diverse needs. And as we think about this on an institutional level, whether you're coming to this conversation from a farm stand, a community garden, a school garden, or a food-based organization, stakeholders that reflect the richness of the diversity of the communities in which these intended services go to have to begin thinking about how to speak the language and speak to the needs of the individuals in the community, the actual constituents. So when we begin to think about procurement and solidarity food models, we also begin to think about what is it that people are communicating that we may not be attuned to hearing. right? And a great way to begin to shift our ears to listen is to actually tune into, to tap into the proven models that work, the proven systems of knowledge sharing, and also the tried and true community leaders. So solidarity models of any scale are really successful when we partner with, when we embrace the ways in which various communities are already serving themselves. And so this ties into this piece of sovereignty. How are communities finding their own autonomy in this massive food movement? So one of the ways in which we begin to move this kind of work forward is championing the purchasing of farmed food, as well as produced foods and added value goods from small and mid-scale farmers. When we begin to help pool the collective neighborhood resources into collective purchasing power, then we begin to begin to empower farmers from our region in a very different way, right? Another thing that comes out of that is now you have community members who are engaged with food on a different level because they are knowledgeable of the farmers, building relationships, and able to begin having conversations around policy and advocacy on a deeper level because they were invited to have the conversations around procurement. We expand out of the notions of farm stands and other models into community-run farmers markets, right? Pieces that have more people involved, provide services to more constituents, and also offer a greater range of products, including opportunities for value-added products that meet the consumer's needs, meet the neighborhood's needs beyond fresh foods and vegetables. Organizations like Just Food help to bring these conversations together, help knit them in a way that centers not just other institutional participation, whether they are, excuse me. So Sam asked a great question. What does a bona fide mean in this context, right? So for example, if the regional farmer is someone who's actually from the Northeast, whether it's Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, or New York, and it's clear, it's been vetted that their farm is in this place, they're a bona fide regional farmer, right? So in my work, in like my 10 plus years doing work with markets, there have been stands and farmers markets that have had to procure food from other places that were not regional, but making sure that the responsibility of vetting the farmers and providing the support so that they're able to get to market, get to their consumers, use the incentive programs. That's a really important piece that assures that the people who should be at markets are able to be there. So that's a very valuable question. How do you know? How do you assess who is supposed to be receiving the goods, who is supposed to be providing the goods? Oftentimes community members are not in the position because of lack of time, access to resources, et cetera, to go ahead and vet people and then support people as needed. But there are so many people on this call right now and in these spaces who have access to the resources to do so, whether it's supporting a local 5-borough person in the process of becoming a beekeeper, or working with an organization and the local health departments to secure incentive programs, or making sure to hand out information about the farmers markets to the local community boards. These are all ways in which we begin to activate communities to collect our power, to pool our power together. And so Just Food and a number of other organizations provide technical assistance and deeper trainings that help empower people on the level of starting a CSA. There are trainings for starting a farmer's market. There are trainings for community chef programs. There's a trainer of training program. training of trainers program, excuse me. And so these are examples of ways in which on an institutional level, there's technical assistance that can trickle down to the community level. And there are all of these advocacy tools and actual advocacy campaigns that help really shift what our neighborhoods need to look like. But solidarity-based models, beyond purchasing power, it also includes educating community in the policies and practices that are essential to preserving foodways that are real for them, right? And so it also includes standing with communities from a point of activism and advocacy to ensure that services that are brought to the community, they're used within the communities. And so we also go through and we look at like community supported agriculture, also known as CSA, as an example of a solidarity-based model. In my own time, I've watched CSAs grow from being small operations in certain neighborhoods to being all over New York City, to changing their payment plan structures, to expanding their offerings to include meat, dairy, eggs, and other value-added products, to accepting EBT and SNAP benefits. These are all strategic ways in which one framework for bringing food into a community has been moved in a broader capacity, right? And so as we continue to learn more about the resources that are available to us, then we can begin to really deepen how community is empowered through these models. So what we're going to do, I'm going to invite Kiana to come back in and join me through this, is we're still on mute, Kiana.
Yes. Yes.
We are going to jump into this notion of experimenting with designing a project, right? Because something magical happens when you take a concept and you try to put practice around it. And so we are going into breakout groups, and in our breakout groups, I believe they're randomly assigned. Some of the things that we want to consider are the things that we need in order to bring our experience to the table and also listen to the other experience in the room and think about the experiences that are in our ideal communities. And so each breakout group has specific things that we want to look at. So Kiana designed it according to, you know, the way people think in terms of construction, design, and architectural frameworks. So our base building, so your very foundation. You're looking at community. What does funding look like? What are the possibilities for different sites? And then how are we assessing what community needs? How are we pulling together the human resources in order to make sure that these things are in place to create sustainable movements? So do you want to jump into breakout groups or say something in addition, Kiana?
Oh yeah, no, thank you. That's such a good intro. Yeah, I would just piggyback on that to just say that, yeah, this is just to, what we're gonna have that lens to is increasing the self-determination of, you know, in fostering the collective power, just as you mentioned. So holding that in mind, we jump into these breaks. So this is not the only answer, but these are some of the base grounding points that would be good to get folks primed and percolating in their heads with their blueprints.
Okay.
Oh, great. So we wanted to have breakouts so folks had a chance to mingle a little bit more, think through some of the things that kind of come up. And then before we go to break, we thought that Tri and I could, or if folks have things that they want to share in the chat as well, just maybe some top points that maybe came up, and if there are other items that maybe need to maybe get watered and seeded in the community garden. So are there any things that are coming up that came up in your breakout group that you want to share with us?
So do you want to have people open to share first, and then we just do our report back after?
Sure.
Okay.
Does if you raise your hand, we'll be able to unmute you. And also feel free to write in the chat.
Okay, so while people are getting their ideas percolating, what we did in our group was we took some time to introduce ourselves, where we're from, and the projects that we're working on. And I encouraged everyone to take one idea that was inside someone else's project and bring it to their own. So just really quickly, we had one person who is working in Southern California with 24 community garden beds, and half are given to the community, half are rented out. The produce from half is given to the community, and then the other half is rented out. They also participate in a farmer training program where everyone gets a 1/4 acre of land at a reduced rate for 5 years. And so I encourage people to lift up this notion that the farmer training program also ensured them access to affordable land for 5 years, and the significance of that in moving forward with the work. One person is based in New York City and is interested in challenging the environmental footprints around lawns that exist in some of the neighborhoods that take up space, use water, and provide very little. And so the notion there was, how do you begin to activate these green spaces that are everywhere and underutilized? Another person, they ran found and a 15-year-old CSA, and now they are looking to expand to include EBT. So looking at how an organization can grow and evolve to meet its constituents' needs in deeper ways. And then one person works with a nonprofit organization and is challenging what equity looks like from the leadership down, right? Well, not leadership down, but from the leadership to the constituents, and how to work toward institutions in which the leaderships are informed of the needs of the constituents and respond in a sensitive way. And one individual works with a coalition of pantries, and just noticing how the poor quality of food that is donated creates more food waste. And what does it look like to begin to challenge emergency food preparation possibilities by making sure that the full gamut of needs around food storage and preparation are in place. And one person is doing some really interesting work in New York City around emergency food, but also the distribution of seeds and trees, and thinking through ways to very affordably begin to literally reshape the landscape. And so again, the encouragement was for people to cross-pollinate their ideas, right? So take what you already have and merge it with something that someone else has mentioned to create a hybrid, to begin thinking about the project differently.
Oh, great. Fantastic. In our group, we had a spectrum of folks, from either folks that are new to community food projects and interested in starting some, or some that have started, and even some that are in the midst of pivots due to COVID. So what we talked about, or what came up, was that spectrum of how to secure and find ways to address pivots in projects, how to build partnerships around donations, and also addressing viability, and how to figure out viability in the projects that we're in now, or transitioning into building collaborations like with CBOs to get either the 501c3 access, address banking issues. So either doing that within your group and your project, or finding partnerships on how to get that. So yes, viability on the community side as well as the farm side is really important to make sure that these are approaches that are entering our communities that meet multiple needs, individuals, restaurants, um, food insecure folks in emergency systems, folks that are not, and how we can make sure our models are able to kind of sustain and be longer term and build some sustainability within the infrastructure.
Nice.
Yeah, all good things.
Okay.
Very interesting. I mean, I think these times are really showing us how important it is to know what's already happening and find ways to connect with each other. And I think it also brings up some of the additional risks that comes, or additional capacity that's needed to manage and operate together.
Nice. Nice.
Ah, great. Awesome. Thank you, Sia, for the music.
You're welcome.
Yes, and thanks for the reminder in the chat that, yes, all the links to the resources that we're sharing will be provided at the end of the series. However, just to make sure folks get the links to the session Zooms, you'll get those sooner than the full resource guide. But without further ado, something that comes up so often is how to feasibly connect to EBT and SNAP at farmers markets, farm stands, and CSAs. And so we are really fortunate and great to partner with Farmers Market Federation and have Katie, whose focus is around the tech info. So I'm going to pass the mic to Katie. Thanks for joining us and walking us through this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about something that most people think is the least fun part of their work, which is EBT technology. So I guess to start off, I can introduce, the title of today's presentation is Asking the Right Questions. And I think so often with farmers market operators and community groups and projects, we just want to jump in and start doing the work. But I really want to shift all of our focus during this presentation towards the preliminary questioning process, the discovery period, where we're finding out what our real needs are and what the most appropriate technology is for our projects, rather than just jumping in and making a choice. So then our partners on this work are the Nutrition Incentive Hub. We work with two groups called the Ecology Center and MIFMA, the Michigan Farmers Market Association. They are excellent technical assistance providers, and they work on some of the more nitty-gritty technical assistance about how to actually implement programs. So I just want to lift up them as a resource to everybody on this call as you're working through your EBT program development. They would be a great resource, and I'm happy to link you up with them. You can go to the next slide. Thanks. So just a little bit more about FMC. I kind of alluded to this earlier, but we are an education center, a voice, and a network. I'm excited about all three, but I think what's really unique about our approach is our network. We're not a top-down approach. We really look at what's working in local communities and see what we can do at the national level to support other folks in taking on those ideas and implementing them in their own communities. And I like to think of it as we want everybody to run as fast as they can. And we want to support folks in being able to gain as much information from each other in a lateral network, rather than everybody fighting battles on their own. So that's what I find really exciting about FMC's work. And that's kind of why I'm here to talk with you all. So the first two questions that most folks often ask, you can go to the next slide. Thanks. The first two questions that most people often ask when it comes to technology are, what do I need and how do I pay for it? These are really important questions, but they don't really capture the full journey that we want folks to take when it comes to technology. And you can go to the next one again. And then one more. We want it to be more of this longer process of thinking through what I consider 5 steps. So what Kiana was mentioning earlier about an asset assessment, yes, we need to look at what we already have in our communities. And I don't mean necessarily physical assets. We'll talk a little bit more about what I mean when I say, what do I already have? And then what am I missing? What do I need to add into either my model or my physical market space in order to prime our market for EBT? The third step then, when you put those two together, is imagining the model, which we won't focus a lot on, but I think this is a heavily self-discovery driven session where we're taking into account what we have, what do we need, and then building that model and telling yourself the story of what your model is going to look like. And then from there, we can finally choose the technology. Once we choose our technology and we go down that road, we can finally implement it, but we're not focusing on implementing today. We're just focusing on what's leading up to that point. So you can go to the next slide. So with EBT, I think it's important that we know where we're coming from a policy perspective before we figure out where we're going. And a lot of people are not familiar with the policy history of EBT. EBT is formerly known as food stamps, which most of the folks on this call probably know. But the key distinction with the food stamps and why it's important to remember is a food stamp was a physical paper system where the federal government would print off food stamps and distribute them out to folks across the nation. The reason that they evolved this into an electronic benefit transfer there's two main reasons. One of those is fraud and the other is cost. So if any of you are familiar with government programs, there's always a political concern about fraud. Somebody's abusing the program. Well, we know this is not true with SNAP. We know it's already one of the least likely government programs to experience fraud, where it was already under a 4% fraudulent rate in the 80s, but yet there was still concern about it. So we shifted it over to electronic benefit transfers. And what this served to do actually was limit the amount of fraud from 4% down to 1%, which is insanely low. It's a testament to the success of the program. It also served to reduce the cost. So the cost to folks, to the federal government and the state level agencies decreased once it's transferred to a credit card system. And it was exactly that. It was meant to follow the development of the credit card industry. So as the credit card industry evolves and makes updates like mobile wallets and that sort of thing, EBT is designed to kind of follow along as like a tag along. That would ensure that, we're minimizing stigma associated with folks using the system so it looks culturally the same as using a credit card at, a retailer or a farmer's market. But with that transition came a lot of issues. One of those being farmers markets were sort of left out of the equation. So over the years, in the last 20 years, farmers markets have developed this script token system, which some of you are maybe familiar with. It's still in use today. The kicker with the script and token system is that the federal government does not really like it. They don't like that farmers markets are issuing their own currency and folks are redeeming that at the market space. So we can predict in the EBT world that there will be a lot more changes coming to EBT that will somehow, maybe change the way that we use scripts and tokens, but we don't have to worry about that quite yet. But I think it's always important to be thinking ahead and looking at what's on the horizon. So I just have to mention that piece too. And it's important to recognize that EBT was only fully ratified in 2008. So it's still relatively new if you think about the overall arc of history. So yeah, you can go to the next one. So the first step of starting the process, we're going to talk about assessing capacity and yeah, thanks, Kiana. It's true. I break out capacity into two buckets when it comes to EBT. I think about the humans, the people that you have working with you, and then the financial part of it. So here are a couple examples of questions that I'd really recommend you asking yourself as you start this process. And these will help you kind of inform that model that you will imagine as a story that you're going to tell and build around your market. So things like, do you have a few hours a week to manage this every single week? Will you have a market manager on site? And do you have the ability to pay that person on site each week? Do you have community-based organizations that are able to support you in this? How many hours do you think it's going to take you, and what are you basing that amount on? Have you talked to other folks about how many hours it's taken them? The reason why we don't say, expect to spend 3 hours on this, 2 hours on this, you need 3 people for this, is exactly what Tree and Kiana were saying earlier, this isn't a one size fits all situation. This is really something that's on each of our communities to imagine and build ourselves. And that means we can take lessons from others, but it still means we need to make a distinction between, what's the template and what's our reality. So it's really important to understand the specific answers to these questions. And on the financial piece, this is where a little bit more of the formality comes from. Do you have a checking account that you'll be using to make reimbursements to farmers? Do you have somebody on your staff who knows how to seek out grant funds and apply for grants? Do you have money right now to purchase equipment, or is that something that you need to budget into a plan? And then cash flow. Your farmers are going to be expecting money every week. How's that going to work out? And checks or electronic reimbursement are both options. So some of these kind of nitty-gritty questions, do I have the infrastructure to put all of these pieces together is the underlying question. And do we have the ability to get that going? Go to the next slide. So then we're going to go from what we have to what we need. So I think there's two types of needs. There's the external need. So, is there a compelling community need for SNAP? Do we have folks in our community that would really want this and want to use it? Are there already community efforts out there in putting SNAP into other retailer spaces? Can we work with those efforts? And if not, what are the barriers? And this gets more at the needs. What's been the stopgate for making these programs work in the past in your community? Understanding some of those needs are really important before you embark on this journey. Internal, these are some of the questions that maybe might be surprising to folks, but a really important question is, are you going to be operating your market outside in cold weather? EBT terminals have been known to shut off right when it gets to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, the point of freezing. So what kind of device would you need if you're running in the late season or the early season or a winter market? I think that's a really critical piece. Or if your machine dies, you have the ability to run paper vouchers as a backup or offline transactions. Another big piece is the connectivity potential. So do you have access to Wi-Fi? Do you have access to dial-up internet, or are you going to need to purchase a cellular data plan? We can get into a little bit more of the differences for those, but knowing what you have as a potential internet connection is actually absolutely imperative before you choose your device, because that will be programmed into the device before you even get it. And we talked a little bit about accounting practices before, the disbursement of funds to farmers. I think the really important question to ask is, do we have somebody who's really good at accounting? Do we know what it's going to take to put all these pieces together? Or do we have a plan for learning how to manage it? I think the great thing about SNAP and EBT is nothing is out of scope to learn. It's not this, outrage. It's a little bit of work every single week, and consistency. It's required to make it happen, but you don't need to be, a paid full-time accountant to make these processes run smoothly. There's plenty of resources out there for that too. But just the willingness to learn is super important. And the last piece is just really deciding if it's going to be a short-term or a long-term investment, and then the FNS piece of it. We won't go too far into the FNS application, but the really critical piece if you take anything away from the FNS part of this, is that you want to make sure whoever you're putting on your FNS application is somebody that's going to be trustworthy and will stay with your organization for a long time, or will warn you before they leave. And this might seem, obvious. We're working with them. They're great. They're not going to run away and disappear. But it's a real big headache if this person leaves your organization and you have to shift the application towards a new person's name. Sometimes, organizations have to actually make a new application altogether, because they can't, the FNS and the USDA doesn't have this quick fix for that. So I would just recommend to pin that point of the process too. Okay, and imagining your model. So we won't spend much time on this, but I just wanted to lift up kind of an example of what kind of a narrative I'd recommend you all writing down about your markets. So thinking through some of the details and connecting the dots. This is kind of a picture of our model, how it functions in person. This is what we're missing. And this is what we believe is possible if we put all these pieces together. So this big picture sometimes allows you to kind of illuminate some opportunities and connect some dots as you're walking into building some of the more nitty-gritty project plans. Go to the next slide. Okay, so we're going to run through a few different options, very lightweight, and some of these are based on Kiana's and Tree's kind of delineation of what was the term? The solidarity-based models, which yes. I love so much. Thank you. So the first one is I'm going to lift up as a CSA farm stand. There's one site and one farmer. So the possibility here for SNAP is something that's very low cost and low admin if you can get the farmer to manage the transactions themselves. So the example is we partner with a farmer to offer a weekly food box pickup of 15 boxes to our neighborhood. The farmers are going to be managing the EBT transactions, and we can support the site and the promotions. So I would recommend this being the first route that anyone takes, trying to increase the capacity of that farmer if they have the ability to sell food on site and take EBT transactions. This would be by far the fastest way to get it up and running. The next one is a little bit more involved. It's a higher cost, but maybe a medium administration. This is kind of the same scenario where you have a CSA or market box, still only one farmer, maybe more than one farmer, but it's one site. In this case, you're going to have maybe a non-farmer's going to hold the FNS number. It might be you, it might be another fiscal sponsor. So really the pieces here are, how are you going to make sure that there's a person there to staff it? And are you going to do a weekly redemption versus every 2 weeks? I think there's a lot of questions out there about, how often can somebody who is using SNAP to purchase a CSA, can they purchase upfront, or do they need to be there every week? The most updated information I have on that is that you can purchase up to 2 weeks in advance. So that could cut down your administration time to be on site accepting EBT in half, because you'd only have to have somebody every other week. So this could be a really great way of expanding the ability for folks to participate in a CSA without necessarily needing to make that big lump sum payment that's traditionally associated with EBT. And the big asset here is your farmer. Your farmer is going to have to work with you on this and find something that will work. And so, what Kiana was saying about forging really tight relationships with your regional growers is imperative for making something like this work. And the last line on that page is we'd like to add capacity to double the boxes sold to 30 boxes. This is huge for a farmer. If you could double the amount on their drop-off, that's a huge asset to them. And you're getting your needs met by expanding access in your community. So there's kind of a win-win exchange where there's an economic benefit for that farmer and a real tangible benefit for your community. You can go to the next one.
Yeah. Oh, Katie, I'll just pop in here just for a quick second, just to say, I think this also highlights what you're mentioning is around the farm viability piece and how much meeting a need and increasing the share can make a difference for the farmer. But that other side of it is needing the capacity to manage this work. And, oftentimes this becomes opportunities for paid stipends and paid opportunities for folks to do beyond just volunteering and keeping it going. So something that it makes me think of too is connecting to whether you're an unincorporated group or you're working towards getting a 501c3 or you have it, is ways to connect to funding around supporting the EBT operators and other staffing at your markets. So Fresh Connect has a community program or application exactly to help support this, where a group that applies can get $10,000 to go towards EBT operation, paid stipends, labor costs, and other related market fees. You do need to have either a 501c3 of your own in the group or be fiscally sponsored by a group that has a 501c3, but we can talk more about that in session 3. And we'll be sharing the resources to that. And Citizens Committee is a funder, funder in the city that any group, unincorporated in particular, grassroots groups, are able to apply for $5,000 grants. And the application is really easy. It comes out about once or twice a year, and we'll share that info in the resource guide.
That's great, thank you. The last example that I'm gonna lift up is maybe more of a traditional community run farmers market. The big difference between the farmers market and the other models that I just mentioned around maybe, a one farmer CSA, is just that you might have more farmers and it might not make sense for each of these farmers to invest in their own EBT technology. One piece that we have to think about is, not every farmer is coming to the table with the exact same experience with technology and resources. So again, looking at that from an equity lens and thinking about at the market level, how can we enable all of our farmers to accept SNAP while maximizing the options for community members? And sometimes that means, a centralized EBT terminal, processing terminal, where the organization or the market manager, which is a non-farmer, is managing those transactions. And those farmers are able to accept tokens and exchange those for dollars at the end of the market. A big piece here is you can think really outside of the box on who's going to be that person who's accepting dollars on site. I think, many markets have artisans or artists being the ones who are accepting the EBT. So it doesn't need to be, a dedicated staff person necessarily. If you have a very willing artist or other food vendor that doesn't have SNAP eligible products, sometimes it's nice to even the playing field, and they're happy to be there. They're happy to get the word out about their product or their arts, in exchange they're processing those EBT transactions to prevent, one of the farmers from doing that and carrying that burden. Sometimes it gets into a bit conflict of interest if you have multiple farmers on site at the market and one of them is accepting SNAP and then folks are taking those EBT tokens to other stands. So I would just encourage you to think a little bit more broadly about who are those leaders in your community that really want to show up as market vendors, and how can you leverage them in ways that respect their time and respect the different capacities of the farmers that are participating, and giving everybody kind of the similar access to opportunity there. The scale of your market is going to be a really big piece in this. That'll determine kind of what level of EBT transactions you're processing, what are the costs, and making sure you have some of those projections when you're approaching a processing company, knowing that I'm expecting to do about $500 a week, meaning about $2,000 a month. That's my level of transactions. What can you offer me? That's really empowering to know that information and talk directly to companies with that information. And it allows you to speak from a perspective where you're expecting certain levels of processing fees and transaction costs. And again, we don't have time to get into the nitty gritty of transaction costs, but perhaps another time we can talk about that. So because we have a few minutes left here, I'm going to go quickly through the three types of options of EBT terminals: mobile, wireless, and wired. So the first option is mobile, and this mobile, just like your mobile phone, it has often a cellular data plan that's attached to it. You can accept EBT payments from anywhere you want. The most popular option would be at the top left, the TotalPay Go. It works directly on a cell phone, so you can have an app-based system with a Bluetooth-enabled printer. But the big distinction with this one is that it has a paid cellular data plan attached to it. The next option is wireless, and again, just like it sounds, it connects to Wi-Fi. So these are the same devices that in often cases that you saw on the last slide, but the difference is these aren't connected to a cellular data network, they're connected to Wi-Fi. And the third and last option is wired. So this option is good for those who don't have connectivity. Maybe they don't want to pay for a cellular data plan, but they have the ability to hook up to an Ethernet cord or dial-up internet. So those are the kind of bucketed distinctions, and that's why it's really important to kind of look at what's possible in your own market setting. The last two pieces I'm going to talk about are state contracts really quickly, and then MarketLink, which is a really great program if you have your own device that you can use already, which many of us have cell phones, and if you have a smartphone, it's a good option. But every state has different options for, some states actually pay farmers markets for their equipment. They'll cover the costs and transactions for a period of time. To my knowledge, New York currently does not have this option, but you can see there's a handful of states that already do. And in the next slide, I'll show you an option that is eligible for all of those, even those who don't have state contracts. So TotalPay Go is an app that is SNAP enabled, so they can accept EBT. There's a national program right now that's funded by the USDA that will pay for a Bluetooth reader, as long as you have some sort of smartphone that you can use. Now, some people are hesitant about this because they don't want to use their own device at the public market setting. But for some folks, this is really crucial for, just getting going at a short-term solution while you're raising money for maybe a more permanent solution. So I would highly recommend this for folks who want to get going right away, or any farmer who wants to start working on processing EBT. So to kind of recap, I'm just going to go over some quick resources. We have a lot of great resources on SNAP on our website, and you can dig a little bit more into what we do there. There's an archived webinar on the SNAP Guide that's kind of about more of the nitty-gritty of the EBT technology and processing options out there. And I recommend that you take FMC SNAP Guide with a grain of salt and cross-reference it with your own, add your own spin to it. It's just really meant to get your mind thinking about options. Lastly, the Farmers Market Legal Toolkit and state contracts. Like Kiana says in the chat, state contracts are a really huge opportunity for advocacy that FMC is really going to be taking on in the near future. We want every state to offer a program where farmers markets don't have to pay for their own SNAP equipment. So to do that, the state contracts are a big opening, and we're working on that. So if anyone's interested in joining that fight, we'll probably get to know each other a little more down the road.
Wow, that was super informative. Thank you so much, Katie.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you, Kiana, for the important things that you lifted up. That was a lot to digest, right? And all of it was very useful. Again, let me reiterate that Just Food works with organizations to do full-on trainings on starting a farmer's market, full-on trainings on starting a CSA. And so there are opportunities to really dive in to making this happen. We are closing. And I don't know about you all, but I feel so inspired, particularly in my breakout group when I was able to hear who was on the call and what you all have going on. Like, I feel, particularly at this moment in time in this country's history, that we are actually in good hands. And it's been a long time, at least a few months since I have felt that way. And as for the people who I was able to hear some of the things that they're working on, I encourage you to really take the time to plan and make it possible through the winter into the spring, because we really don't know what we're facing, right? Mm-hmm. And now is when communities need advocates like you all, communities need growers like you all, communities need thought leaders like you all to continue to move the amazing work that you are doing forward. So it was an honor to be here today. I'm gonna let Kiana tell you all the technical stuff.
Thank you. No, I mean, I think you said it. I think we are, first, want to thank Katie, want to thank Tree, I want to thank Sia so much for the information and the context and getting us here. These trainings are nothing without us, without our partners and you all for joining. So thank you all for being here and connecting. But like Tree said, we're at such a pivotal time. Our season is changing. The way we look at solidarity, the way we look at building with each other. This is an opportunity in the midst of crisis to really think about the systems that we want. And so, I hope this starts to get you more connected and aware of the existing resources that are out there, the hard work that folks have been doing even before these crisis times, and the ongoing advocacy points, grassroots points, programming points, and even new information. I learned something new today from everybody. So these are just starting points. But in terms of the technical, Again, yes, we offer additional trainings that go deep to get folks like organize and plan and talk about permits, rules, and regs. But right now, we're seeking funding to offer that from different funds. So we'll keep people posted, but these are resources, that trainings that are available, and we have some immediate resources that we would share and technical assistance information. I definitely encourage folks to pivot to Farmers Market Coalition site and check their information out too, if you're more primed. And then in terms of technical, we're wrapping up today, but we will be together Monday for session 1 and go through some of those pieces. And then session 3, I encourage folks to bring some of their questions, points, maybe other pieces that you're looking into more info or want more info. Come back to session 3 and let's have an informal working session where you'll hear from not just us, but other CSA core group leaders, other community advocates to really start the connections that we have. Fall and winter's coming, it's time to build. So with that, I will say thank you. Thanks to everybody. We'll be wrapping up the training and links will be out soon.